So let us just first quickly review what we looked at in the previous lecture, and after that we are going to start with what new topics we are going to look at. Okay. Okay. So yesterday we started off by looking at memory hierarchy, right? And in memory hierarchy, we said that we have two different categories. The first one is primary memory, and the second one is secondary memory. And we also looked at the different names that these are given. So, primary memory is also known as internal memory, and secondary memory is also known as external memory. Now, the basis on which these are categorized are basically dependent upon their accessibility. So, primary memory is directly accessible by the processor, so it actually requires less time. And since secondary memory is not directly accessible by the processor, it requires an input output module, right? So, based on this, we also looked at the memory hierarchy. So you can see here, this is the memory hierarchy. We have registers at the top. Now this memory hierarchy is arranged on the basis of access time as well as the capacity and the cost. So access time will decrease as we go up in this hierarchy. So we say any data can be accessed very fast when we access it using registers. Then as we go down, the access time will increase, so you will require some more time in order to access. Okay. Okay, so before we just go ahead, uh, there are a few things that I would want to discuss with you guys. So the first thing is that a lot of you are still sending messages with your details like email ID and university roll number. So we are not going ahead and sending any more emails. All the registered candidates have been sent the email. Okay. So again, if you aren't able to understand, I would like to repeat it in English as well as in Hindi. We are not sending any more emails. All the registered candidates have been sent the emails. Okay. And also, so there's a star here. If any of the candidates who has registered and not gotten the mail, you haven't received the mail, in that case, we are going to consider you. But if you're still sending your details and you are not registered, nothing can be done now. Okay. And regarding the same thing, a message has also been posted on the Telegram group. This message has been pinned, so you can look at that anytime you want. If you in case forget it, just read it again. It will not be considered if you're sending your details. So stop doing it and stop spamming the group. Okay, is that clear to everyone? And be it for any reason that you were not able to register, we are not going to be considering you. The next thing is, a lot of you have forwarded the links to your friends who haven't registered. this is not actually going to work. So even if you are able to attend the classes by accessing someone else's link, then also you will not be considered to be successfully completing the boot camp, and you are not going to get the certificate. So this clearly means that if you haven't registered and you attend all the classes and submit all of the assignments and the projects, you are not going to get the certificate anyway. Okay, is that clear to everyone? For some of the people whom I have already talked to, they haven't gotten the mail and they have registered. I'm going to check into their details. If that exists in there, then they are going to be considered. Okay, I hope this was clear to everyone and everyone heard it carefully. Also, if some of you thinks that you're going to be attending the classes and then later on we are going to consider you, this is not going to happen. So if you want to leave the group and not want to attend any class, you can do that. No questions will be asked. Okay, so looks like everyone clearly heard this and it is clear to everyone about what was the main prerequisite. The main prerequisite was to register for the boot camp. Let us just continue with the class now. Okay, so we have discussed, we were looking into the review of the previous lecture and we've discussed memory hierarchy and on what basis we said that we are going to divide uh, the memory hierarchy or the different types of memories into categories. Let us continue look at the next topic, which was compilation process. So in the compilation process, we said that there are different steps. When you elaborate those different steps, you get pre-processing, which is the first step which happens after you've written down the code in the text editor and saved it. The saved file is on the hard drive and then you pre-process it. Pre-processing basically removes the hash directives. It is going to process all of the header files that you've included and the macros that you have mentioned. The next step is compilation process. The actual compilation process only involves of converting the high level language code, the code that you've written, to assembly language, and it also performs certain different kind of analysis. So one of those is syntax analysis, right? So after this particular part happens, so I've also given you an example over here. So if say suppose these are certain statements in your code, they are going to be converted into assembly language, which actually looks like this. Okay. So after they are converted to assembly language, the next step that happens is by the assembler. So the assembler is going to convert this assembly language code into opcode or object code. So based on the opcode which is corresponding these instructions, the complete code is converted to object code, which is in the form of zeros and ones, right? And the next thing that happens is linking. So in linking part, we have other different files which are, let us say, connected with your current program that you want to run. They are combined together. All of the libraries and any other object files that is required for the running of your program are linked together, and after that an executable file is generated. So this executable file is then loaded into the RAM by the loader, and once it is loaded, it can then run as a process. Okay, so this was about the compilation process. Let us continue, look at the next thing that we looked at yesterday, which was process image in memory. So we said that for any program that you write, so we were talking in specifically about a C program. So whenever you write a C program, how does it look like in the memory? So there are different sections in which your program is divided. So we say that, let us say, take for example, you have written down this C program. You will have sections, different sections in which each part of this program will go into. So in the stack, on the stack, you will have the local variables along with the pointers. Then you will have the shared library. In the shared library, you're going to have input output routines. So we said that input output routines, so basically the actual definition or actual code that is going to run whenever you are going to perform any input output operation will be inside the shared library. Okay, other than that, we have heap will actually have memory for the dynamically allocated variables. So say suppose you have certain variables in this code which are going to be allocated some memory dynamically, so they this memory is going to be inside heap. The next two sections we have here is read write memory and read only memory. So in read write memory, you will have global variables. The static variables also go in here. And in the read only memory, as the name suggests, there are going to be things which can only be read. So the code as well as the constants are going to be stored inside the read only memory. At runtime, if you want or if you are changing, making changes in the read only memory, that is in the code or the constants, then your program won't run. Okay, so Palak is saying pointers get memory in the stack as well as in the heap. No, so we are not talking about pointers here. So this question, I'd taken up this question yesterday as well, which is heap is only going to store the memory that is dynamically allocated, whereas stack is going to store the actual value, that is the address. So pointers are going to have certain address. That address is going to be stored on the stack, while the actual memory will be in the heap. So this pointer that is going to be stored on the stack will be pointing to the memory in the heap. Okay, so the next thing and the last thing that we looked at and discussed yesterday were physical and logical addresses. So we looked into a very basic definition of what these are and why this happens. So we say that we have a physical address for any program that we've made, and for corresponding this physical address, whenever we are going to run our program, the CPU is going to generate a logical address, which is actually like an, you can say, like an alias. It is not an actual address, but it maps to an actual address. Okay, so logical address is an address which actually maps to a actual address, which is the physical address, and it is present in the memory. Okay, so and, and which part does this thing for you? The MMU, or the memory management unit, is going to map the logical address to a physical address. Okay, So these are the things that we discussed yesterday, and also what were the reason behind having a logical address as well as a physical address. So physical address was basically the actual address that you have, while when you talk about a logical address, since you do not want the user to actually access certain parts of the memory, you say that the user is only going to be looking at the logical address and not the actual physical address, so that whenever you refer to a particular logical address, that is not going to be of a that is not going to map to a physical address which is of the restricted memory. Okay, so this is about logical address and physical address. Stack and heap actually belong inside the RAM. So the virtual address can change as well. It is not necessary that it is going to remain the same. I just answered this question. Why do you require a logical address? So there are certain parts of the memory, say for example, where the OS or the kernel is residing, and you do not want the user to actually access this particular part or manipulate this particular memory. So for that, you say that I am going to give the user a logical address using which he is going to first map his logical address to physical address and then access a particular memory location, so that the user cannot directly access the physical address of the restricted memory. Okay, so let us, since we have already reviewed what we did previously, let us just continue and look at some certain new topics. So we are going to begin with arrays today. We are going to talk about arrays. We are first going to discuss the basic things, and let us say the declaration part, the initialization part. We are also going to look at dynamically how to dynamically allocate memory for an array. And after that, towards the end of the class, we are going to look at certain things which are going to be from the actual coding section. Okay, so let us just begin with this. Okay, so there are certain questions here. The value, Miti is asking, the value of z variable will be stored in the stack and memory will be stored in the heap. Okay, so Z was actually a dynamically allocated variable that we looked at previously in this particular code. Now, what happens? So say for example, Z has been allocated some certain address. What does malloc actually do? We are also going to look at malloc today, but anyways, you should know that malloc is going to return a pointer, an address which is going to point to the memory location that has been allocated. So say here 4 bytes of memory is allocated. Now before just typing everything in the group, just look here and understand. We say that this 4 bytes of memory, so let us say in the heap this 4 bytes of memory is allocated for this variable, for this particular variable z. Now z, let us say, has the address of let us say 20a. Okay, 20a is the address. Let us say this is in hexadecimal. Now this 20a is going to be here. The memory address 20a is going to be on the heap. So we say that this particular value, only the address, so only the address is going to be at this particular position, which is in the stack, but the actual memory will be inside heap. This address where the actual memory there is, it is going to be inside the heap. Okay, yes, so this is about it. The other question that we have is, does the pointer variable take overall more space than a normal variable? What kind of question is this? I did not understand your question. Say for example, we have a pointer. So a pointer is going to store the address of a particular variable, right? So what is it that you want to know here? A pointer variable is basically storing the address. So any kind of pointer variable is going to be taking up the space only to store the address. It does not really depend upon for what kind of variable it is storing the address. So even if it is storing the address of a float variable or a double variable or even an integer variable, it is going to take up the same space. Okay, let us just continue quickly. Let us begin with arrays. So we are going to be today talking about arrays. So can anyone tell me what are arrays? Quickly. Along with that, if you could quickly go ahead and tell me some of the advantages of arrays. No, the size, that is what I said. The size of the pointer does not depend upon the data type. Yes, so arrays are contiguous blocks of not array, contiguous blocks of a certain type of data. Random memory allocation. What do you mean by random memory allocation? Yes. So let us just go ahead with whatever points you are mentioning. So the first thing is that it allows contiguous memory location, right? The second thing is it is a collection of, as some one of you mentioned, it is a collection of same type of item or elements, right? So this is one of the things. Yes, they are similar type of elements. What are one of some of the advantages? So accessing any particular element is very easy using the index. So you say that easy access of an element by index, right? Yes, so there are, other than these direct advantages and the facts, there are certain other things that you can, certain other, advantages, you may call them, you have for arrays. So you say finding an element or searching becomes very easy. Accessing an element is easier. We've already written that. Yes, so let us just move ahead with this. So how does an array look like? We are going to begin with the very basic things. You might have already looked into it a lot of times, but just let us review all of that. So say for example, I have this array here and I have certain elements inside my array. So let us say I have 5 elements inside my array. My array here is named as A, let us say, and this has 5 elements. Okay. Now, how do you represent the indexes here? So you write down the indexes below the actual elements. So indexing in an array starts from 0. So you have 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Right? So you can see here, if you have 5 elements and the indexing is starting from 0. So the range of the index will be from 0 to number of elements minus 1. So you say from 0 to number of elements minus 1, right? So this was about how an array is represented and how are the indexes ranging from for a particular array which is of, let us say, n number of elements. Okay, now if you want to access any particular element, so any element at index 2, so you simply say a of 2. A of 2 is going to give you an element which is at index 2, and that element here is 30, right? A of 2 is this element. Okay, now since a lot of you already know about this, let us continue. Let us talk about how are you going to declare an array. Okay, so we are going to talk about declaration of an array. So how do you declare an array? You simply mention, so let me write down a statement for declaring an array. You simply say int arr, let us say, and the size of the array, right? So this is a statement which is declaring an array, and what are the different things that you have mentioned in the declaration part? You mention the type of array, the name of the array, by which name are you going to refer to it in the program further. So you have a name for the array, and along with that you have the size or the number of elements in the array. So in C programming language, you can simply use this particular statement to declare an array, right? So now this, since here you see that the size of the array is fixed, you say that, let us say you say that I want to have an array, an integer array, which is going to have 10 elements. So now you have, since you have already declared the array and you say that there are 10 elements in the array, the size here is fixed. So since the size is fixed, we say that this kind of declaration is known as static declaration. So the term you use here is static declaration because the size of the array is fixed. Now, if in case you want to change the size of the array, you cannot do that because you've already told the compiler that my array is going to be of size 10 only. Okay, so this is something which is known as static declaration, where the size of the array is fixed. We are also going to look at dynamic memory allocation for an array, but let us just first look at how are you going to initialize an array. So let us also quickly look at the initialization part. So how can you initialize a particular array? There can be different cases using which you are going to initialize a particular array. So let us consider the same example. Let us consider the same example of this integer array that we have declared. So say suppose I write down this statement. This is going to be, let us say, case 1, where I write down this statement. I say int arr, and I write down inside curly brackets, I am going to write down certain elements, let us say 10, 20, 30, 40 and 50, let us say. So what will happen in this case? Can anyone tell me? If I write down this statement, error. Why? Why will there be an error? Assign array as size 5. Yes. So when you write down this kind of statement where you do not mention the size of the array, but simply initialize it by certain number of elements. So say you have initialized the array. Here you are saying that my array is going to have these many elements. So the compiler will actually going to be initializing the array, and it is saying that I am automatically going to consider that your array is going to have 5 elements. So the compiler is going to reserve 5 element space, and it is going to initialize your array with these elements that you have mentioned inside curly braces. So there is going to be no error. It is going to say that the compiler will automatically consider and calculate the size of the array that you will have. Okay, so this is what you have in the first case of initializing an array. Now say I am going to let us say that int arr of 5, I am telling the compiler that my array is going to be of size 5, that is, it is going to have 5 elements. So now for the initialization part, let us say I am going to write only 3 elements here. Then what is going to happen? Can anyone tell me what will happen in this case 2 here? Yes, the rest of the elements will be 0. So now this time what happens? You have already told the compiler that I have an integer array which is going to have 5 elements, but while initializing I am only giving out 3 elements. So the compiler, what the compiler is going to do for you, it is going to initialize the rest of the elements as 0. So since you had 5 elements, you only initialize 3 of these elements. The rest of the elements will be automatically initialized as 0. Okay? No, so there is not going to be a garbage value. The compiler will automatically initialize these places as 0, these elements as 0. Okay. So these are the different cases how you can actually initialize a particular array statically. So before runtime, if you want to write down these statements in the program, you could do that. But there is this another case, which is, say, if you want to the element from the user. So what you will do in that case, you are going to use the scanf function and a for loop. So you could say for I is equal to 0, like you simply do it. I less than n, I plus plus. You say I would like to scan an integer, since this is an integer array, and store it at the position of a of I. Okay, so this is another method wherein you can ask the user to enter the elements of the array and store it at a particular location. Okay, so this is about initializing an array. Let us now look at dynamic memory allocation part. So we already looked at static allocation. Static allocation of an array, which is just by mentioning the number of elements that you want to have in your array. Let us also look at dynamic memory allocation. So we are going to talk about dynamic memory allocation. Now, why do we require dynamic memory allocation? So why do we require dynamic memory allocation? Can any one of you tell me? Can you please explain case 3 again? So it is simple. Say if you want to initialize the array by asking the user. So whenever, let us say, you are running the program and you want to take the array elements as an input from the user. So you're simply going to run a for loop which is going to start from let us say index 0 and going on up till index n minus 1, and simply scan the elements and store them inside the array at a particular position based on the index. So this is simply about it. You might have done it a lot of times. This case is the same thing, which is taking array elements as an input from the user. Yes, so we were talking about dynamic memory allocation, and a lot of you have already given answers about why do we require dynamic memory allocation. So it is in order to have an array which is having a dynamic size, which means that you can change the size of the array during the runtime. So you say that the size of array can be changed during runtime, right? So this is the only purpose of using dynamic memory allocation. Also, there is this other thing which you do, which is freeing the allocated memory. We are going to look at that also, but in a bit. But let us just talk about the disadvantage of actually using static allocation. Now, let us say, suppose you have already declared an array of size 10 and you've already told the compiler that my array is going to have 10 elements. Now, say at a later point of time in your program, uh, you do not want 5 elements of the array. You are only going to require space for 5 integers, and the rest of the 5 places inside this array are of no use. So in that case, you want to change the size of the array, which you actually cannot do when you're statically allocating the array. But when you're using dynamic memory allocation, so the actual purpose here is to be using a dynamic size, which is changing the size of the array at any point of time you require. Okay. Yes, so the other reason that you can use dynamic memory allocation, as a lot of you are answering in the group, is to avoid wastage of memory, which in a way is really good. Since you have limited memory whenever you are running a program, you always have some limit to the memory, and now you want to use the memory very efficiently. In that case, if you use dynamic memory allocation, it is of very good use to us. So let us look at how can you dynamically allocate memory. So say if in C programming language, so currently we are talking about C programming language. So C defines some library functions. Let me write this down. And these library functions come under which library? Can any one of you tell me what is the name of the library under which we have functions for dynamic memory allocation? So we have functions like malloc, calloc, and we have free, which header file. Yes, correct. It is stdlib dot h. So stdlib actually stands for standard library. Standard library, under the standard library header file, you are going to have functions like malloc, calloc, and free. And there is this other function which is realloc. But we are going to look at some limited number of functions today, because we are going to be looking at only those functions which we are going to be using. Okay, so the one of the widely used functions for dynamic memory allocation is malloc function. So let us just move ahead and talk a bit about malloc function and how can you use it. Okay, so we have malloc function. So we say malloc actually stands for memory allocation. M for memory, alloc for allocation. We say it is for memory allocation and it is used to dynamically allocate a single large block of memory. Okay, so uh, it is quite easy to understand, since we're looking at dynamic memory allocation, the malloc function for you is dynamically going to allocate some memory for you, but it is going to be in the form of a single large block. So please note this, single large block. Okay, and that will be with a given size. So the size that you've given to the malloc function, it is going to allocate that much single block of memory for you. Okay, so let us just continue and look at how can you use the malloc function. So the malloc function for you is going to return a pointer, and it is going to be a pointer of type void. So we always need to uh, typecast the particular pointer that it returns. So let us say that we are going to have a dynamically allocated memory for an array. So since this array is going to be an integer array, so we say that let us have a integer pointer p. Okay, this is how you declare a pointer. You say int star p. You are going to tell the compiler that this pointer is going to point to a type which is of integer type. And now, how are you going to allocate memory? So you say int star. Let me just first write down the statement and then we are going to understand what it does. So we say int star malloc size of int multiplied by, let us say I want to have 10 elements in my array. So I'm going to say 10. Okay. Now see here. We have this particular statement here we say that the size of integer, we have this size of operator. As you know, size of operator actually returns the number of bytes which can be taken up, which of the variable that is inside this as an argument. Okay, so we say size of integer. Size of integer, if it is 4 bytes, we are going to consider that integer is 4 bytes. So this is going to return to us 4, and we are multiplying it by 10. So we say 40 bytes. This complete argument inside of malloc actually mentions the number of bytes that you want to, number of bytes of memory that you want to allocate. So you say you have 40 bytes. Now, why did I mention 10 here? Because I want to have an integer array. Since it is going to be an integer, so I mentioned size of int and the number of elements that I want to have. So if I want to have 10 elements, each element is going to require 4 bytes of memory. So total will be 40 bytes. So you tell, you using this malloc function, you simply say that I want to allocate a single large block, in this case 40 byte size block of memory, and where this memory will be reserved. Where will this memory be reserved? Can anyone tell me? It is going to reserve some memory, which is 40 bytes of memory in this case, and then it is going to return the starting address of that particular memory. Okay, so you say 40 bytes of memory. So let us say this is your space, and now here let us say this much is 40 bytes of memory, this much. So this much memory is going to be reserved, and the starting address of this memory will be returned by this malloc pointer, and it is going to be typecasted to an integer pointer and then stored inside p. So now p is pointing to the starting address of this memory location, which has just been reserved, and the size of this particular memory is 40 bytes. Yes, correct. So this memory will be inside heap. So consider this complete box as heap, and now inside heap you have 40 bytes of memory. 40 bytes of memory is reserved, and it is the starting address of this memory is pointed to by this pointer p. Okay, so this is how malloc function actually works. Now if, let us say for example, in your heap you already have a lot of space which is already reserved. So a lot of space here, let us say this space is already reserved. You have only this much space. So if you have only this much space, let us say that this space is only equivalent to 10 bytes, and you are asking to have a memory of 40 bytes reserved for you. In that case, what will happen? Since the space is insufficient, it is not sufficient for you, you required 40 bytes, only 10 bytes of heap memory is free. So in that case, the allocation here, the allocation of the large block of memory by malloc will fail, and it is going to return to you a null pointer. So another point here is, if space is insufficient, allocation will fail and return a null pointer. So this malloc is going to return a null pointer if the memory is not sufficient. Okay, so we have talked about malloc. We have another function calloc, but we are not going to look at that. since that is not something that we are going to be using. We are going to be referring to malloc for all of the further classes whenever we want to dynamically allocate memory. You, if you want, you can go ahead and read about calloc as well. It isn't much different. There are only a few differences. Let us look at another function which is free. So now what happens whenever you are allocating, dynamically allocating some memory in the heap, this memory, after you've allocated it and after, let us say, you've used it also, this memory will not be deallocated. It is going to be remaining there, and it is not going to be free. So like I said here, this memory was not free. Similarly, if you do not free the memory that you have dynamically allocated, then the next time you want to allocate some space in the heap, there will be an insufficient space. So for that, you should always use this function, this free method, and it is used to dynamically deallocate memory. This time we are saying dynamically deallocate memory, since the memory that is allocated using malloc or even calloc is not deallocated on its own. Okay, so how do you use this? How do you use this function free? You simply, after you have simply allocated memory using malloc or calloc, and you have used it, and now you do not require this part of the memory anymore, you simply say free, and you mention the starting address of the pointer that was pointing to it. So you say free p. Okay, so it is going to free this space which was pointed to by p. So for example, here you used this pointer p and allocated some memory. So similarly, it is going to deallocate this particular memory using this function free p. Okay, so this was about uh, correct. So this was about the malloc and free function, and we have already discussed how can you dynamically allocate memory for an array of number of elements, let us say equivalent to n. Okay, so is this part clear to everyone? Okay, so some of you are asking that, let us say, if we, let us suppose if we input the value of n, which is the number of elements during runtime, then can it be called as dynamic memory allocation? So no, it cannot be called dynamic memory allocation. Why? So let us see why. So if, say for example, you are asking the user to input the number of elements, let us say you have asked the user to input n, the value of n, and he inputs the value of n. Now later on in the program, while the program is running, can you change the value of n? You cannot say that I am going to increment the value of n and have another element in my array, right? So this will not be known as dynamic memory allocation. What actually happens when you dynamically allocate memory is that, let us say you have this particular, you've done this malloc function, and now you want to use this particular memory. You can use it later on. If you do not want to use a particular part of the memory, you can free that part. Okay, so this is dynamic memory allocation. Will an initialization like this work? Yes, it will work. Okay, you want me to repeat? Let us just quickly go through this part again because we have a lot of other things as well to cover. So we cannot stay at a particular topic for a long time. So, yes, let us just quickly look at this. Then we are going to understand some of the very interesting things. So we say that in dynamic memory allocation, the size of the array can be changed during runtime. C actually defines some of the library functions, and these library functions are inbuilt functions which can be used for dynamic memory allocation, and they are under the library stdlib.h, which is standard library. And so we discussed two of these functions. We have more functions, but we have only discussed two of these functions. We say that we write malloc function. In the malloc function, so it is going to dynamically allocate a single large block of memory. So now, actually, some I would like to mention some focus on single large block. It is going to be a single large block of memory whenever you are using the malloc function. And now let us look at how are you going to use the malloc function. So you say that I am going to require a pointer because malloc returns you a pointer, and this pointer that malloc returns. So some of you are asking the question, why do we need to write int star here? This is because malloc is going to return you a void pointer. So you already know yourself about which kind of array are you declaring the memory for. You already know yourself that you want to have an integer array, and malloc is returning a void pointer, so you are going to typecast this particular pointer to integer type. The address that it is returning should be in an integer type. Why? Because you want to declare or dynamically allocate memory to a integer type array. That is why you are using this. The rest of the things, that is the argument inside malloc function, is totally dependent upon the size in bytes, about how much size you want to reserve. Okay, how much memory do you want to reserve? So you say size of int. Why do you say size of int here? Because you want to have an integer array. If say you wanted to have a float array, you could have written size of float here. If you want to have a character array, you say size of char here, and the number of elements that you want to have. Okay, so this results to 40 bytes. Why? Because each integer is going to require 4 bytes of memory to be stored. So you say that 40 bytes, 4 into number of elements that you want to have, which is 10 here. So 40 bytes of memory should be allocated in the memory, in the heap. So after it is allocated in the heap, the starting address is stored inside this pointer p. Okay, and now you can use this pointer p like you use a normal array. So you could refer to p, let us say p of 1, which is going to be the second element of your array. Like you actually use your array, you can use this pointer p as the name of the array. Okay, now what happens if the space is not sufficient inside the heap and you want to allocate some memory dynamically? Then the allocation will fail and it is going to return a null pointer. Okay, the next thing that we looked at was free. Free is actually going to be using requiring a pointer which you want to free from the heap. And why do you require to do this? Because the memory that you dynamically allocate using malloc or calloc is not going to free itself. Okay, it is not going to be deallocated on its own, so you require free. So that is about dynamic memory allocation. Okay, Abhinav is asking if we had consumed 40 bytes and more memory is required, then can we allocate more memory? Yes, you could do that. You have another function, as I said, which is reallocate. You can do that. It is going to reallocate again that particular memory. If you want to do it for a larger size, you could do that as well. You can read about the calloc as well as the reallocate function yourself. Let us just continue with the next topic that we are going to look for today. For all of those who want to look into calloc and the realloc function, you can do that yourself. You go ahead online, look into it, and yes, we are not going to be discussing more about it because this is not actually the agenda for us to look at. We have just discussed even these two parts because we are going to be using those. Okay. Yes. So let me just go ahead and tell you some of the interesting things. So we are going to look at. So let us say. So now, say for example, if I have an array and I want to access the ith element of the array, which can be done using this. Okay. Now, for this particular part that we are now going to look at, you will need to recall your pointer arithmetic basis. So, you might have studied about pointer arithmetic, which is what will happen if you add, let us say, an integer to the pointer, or what will happen if you add two addresses and stuff like that. So, we are going to just review that part and understand how can that be used in order to access any particular element from the array. So if you say you have this array ARR, and we have already looked at this particular part where you were saying, where I was saying that P, this variable P, which is a pointer, can actually be used as the array name and simply go ahead by mentioning the index of any particular element in the array and access that element. So P can here be used as the name, right? P can here be used as the name of the array and simply refer to any of the element at any particular index from the array, right? So from that we come to this thing, this fact that this thing, this representation where you are accessing the ith element of array named as ARR, you can also do the same thing using this. So you write ARR plus I. Okay. Okay, so is everyone understanding this? We are going to move ahead and look at how this thing happens and also understand the logic behind this. Okay, has everyone come up till this point where we are discussing these representations? Okay, 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 yes, let us move ahead. So now let us look at this. So, say, let us consider an example. So, say for example, you have this, let us consider a small array. So, let us say you have this small array which has four elements and you have your indexes. Since you have four elements and your indexes will be ranging from 0 to number of elements minus 1, which is 4 minus 1, 3 in this case. So you say this is your array. Let us say this array is named as ARR. Okay. Now you say that ARR of 2. What is this ARR of 2? Which element will you get when you say ARR of 2? It is going to give you this element which is at index 2, which is the element 30, right? Now, this ARR of 2, when you want to access this element, can be done using star ARR plus 2. Okay, we are following this same uh, formula here, which is ARR of I is equivalent to star ARR plus I. So I was 2, so we write 2. Right. Let us understand what is the logic behind this. Okay, so you might have used pointers a lot of times. So what do? You say int star p. Let us just first understand this basic. You already know it, but let us just quickly review it and then understand and apply this logic here. So you say that I want to have an integer pointer p. So you say that this is how I'm going to declare the integer pointer p. Now let us say, for example, you have this variable a. You have variable a, int a, and you are saying that it is going to be initialized some value, which is, let us say, 40. So in the memory, you have 4 bytes of memory reserved for a, which is an integer variable, and you have initialized its value as 40. Now you have another pointer which you say that is of integer type, and you are saying that I want to now store the address of A inside P. So this is the next statement you write. This means that P, the pointer P, is now going to point to address of A. So let me represent that in this diagram form. So you say now P is going to store the address of A. So I am saying that P is pointing to A. Like this. Okay. Is this clear to everyone? Okay, let us move ahead now. So now say if I write two, I'm going to write two statements, and now you're going to tell me what will be the value that is going to be printed when I write these two statements. So I say printf, let us say percentile d, and I say p first, and I say printf percentile d, and I say star p. So what are the two values that are going to be printed? Quickly tell me what are the two values that are going to be printed. Address of A, correct, and 40, right? So these are the two values that are going to be printed. Here when you print P, simply P, you are going to print the address of A. So let us for example, consider that this address of A is 2000. Let us consider that this is 2000. So P is storing the value 2000, right? So when you want to print the value of P, it is going to print 2000. And now when you're saying star P, print star P, so what does this star P mean? This star P here means that I want to print the value. Let me write this down for you. So you say value stored at address stored inside P, right? So P is going to return the value 2000. P, since the value of P is 2000, which is address of A, and star P is going to mean that the value which is stored at address stored inside P. So address which is stored inside P is 2000, and what is the value here? The value here is 40. So it is going to print 40 as an output, right? So you see here the same thing. So this is the first thing that we wanted to understand. You already know this. We have just reviewed it. Okay. Now the next thing is, so now comes the pointer arithmetic part. So using the pointer arithmetic, what happens if you do pointer plus integer? What will happen if you perform this operation, which is adding an integer to a pointer, that is to an address? What will happen in this case? So let me answer this question for you. A lot of you might already know it. What happens here in this case is, you have the address, which is the pointer address, which is stored inside this pointer. So you say the pointer address plus the integer value into the size of data type. So let me write that down as size of data type. Okay. This is what happens when you add an integer to a pointer value. So what will happen? The pointer address plus integer into the size of the data type. So the same thing is happening over here. ARR is a pointer. Do you all agree? ARR is a pointer. Whenever we are dynamically allocating memory, so we did that the same thing here. P is a pointer, we dynamically allocated memory, and now we are going to use this P as the array name and refer to the indexes, right? Same thing we are doing here. ARR is a pointer, we are saying, and we are saying when we add 2 to it, 2 is an integer. So we are saying what will happen here is, you are going to do this star ARR. So let us say here, let us consider the same example here. If ARR has the address 2000, if ARR has the address 2000, you do 2000 plus 2 into the data type of the array. So the data type of the array is integer, so you do 4 bytes, right? So this becomes 2000 plus 2 into 4, which is 8, right? And you're saying now this actually becomes an address. This becomes an address, right? This was already an address. You have added some integers to it. This is currently an address, and you are saying what happens when you print P? When you print P, it is going to return the address. If you print star P, it is going to return the value that is stored at this particular address. So you see, what is the value which is stored at address 2008? Which is this value? So this value is going to be 2008. The value here is 30. So that is why we have this statement equivalent to the other statement that we have here. ARR of 2 will be equivalent to star of ARR plus 2 because of all of this reason that we just looked at. Did everyone understand the logic? Has everyone understood how did we get this? How did we get to this point? Why are we saying that these two statements are equal? Okay, okay, great. So a lot of you have understood this. Let us, since we have already been talking about adding stuff to an address, let us, so now the only thing that you have to keep in mind is that these two statements are equivalent, right? So if at any point of time you get any particular question regarding this thing, so you can get a lot of output based questions in uh, various exams, where the array address will be mentioned like this, and it is going to ask you what is going to be the value which will be at this particular position. Okay, so this is something that you should keep in mind always. Let us, since we are already talking about things like this, let us quickly also talk about address calculation. Okay, so say now, for example, I want to calculate the address of the ith element of the array. Okay, so you're saying, is it the name of the array or is it the pointer? So that is what the point here was to understand. The name of the pointer is same as the name of the array. So the name of the array is actually a pointer. That is what we have been discussing right here. The name of the array, for any array that you create, the name of the array is going to act as an pointer. So if you simply write down ARR, say you have declared an array ARR of 4, int ARR 4, and you simply want to print the value ARR, it is going to return you the starting address of the array. Okay? Okay. So let us quickly look at address calculation. The address calculation of a 1D array is very simple. So let us say I want to find out the address of ith element of array, which can be represented as, let us say, address of a of I. And currently, let us say we are talking about an integer array. So let me also highlight that a of I, a, or let us just say that a is an integer array. Okay. Now, say I have an integer array A and I want to calculate and find out the address of the ith element. By ith element, I say A of i's address. So, how do you do that? So, let me just write down the statement and then we will understand it. We say MA plus I, because you want to calculate the address of ith element, you say I into 4. Now let us understand what this is. So say for example, you have an array and you have certain elements inside the array. Let us say you have 5 elements. You have 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. These are the indexes. And let us say the starting address of this array is MA. So MA here means the base or the starting address. Now, if you know the starting address of the array, you can easily calculate the address of the ith element of the array. Okay, so this is going to have, let us say this MA is 2000. Let us consider, for example, it is 2000 for now. What will be the address of the next element? the address of the next element will be 2000, which is the base address MA plus 4, right? Why? Because an integer element, we have already said that it is an integer array. We say that the size of an integer element is 4 bytes. So this first element is going to take up 4 bytes, and the next element will be stored at 2004. Where will the next element be stored? The next element will be stored at 2008. 4 plus 4, 8, right? And so on so forth, right? So we say that for a generalized formula of finding out the address of the ith element, we say that the base address, the index, and the size of data type. So this is simply how you are going to find out the address of the ith element of a particular array. And we have here talked about an integer array. So can anyone tell me what will happen if, let us say, you have a double array? If a of a is a double array, what will be the changes that you will make to the formula? What will be the changes that you will make to the formula? The address of the ith element in this case will become, yes, so as Anurag has correctly mentioned, it is going to be MA, which is the base address of the array, which is going to remain the same, plus I into 8. The only change that you will have here will be in the size of the data type. So in a double array, each element is going to take up 8 bytes, right? Since it is going to take up 8 bytes, the first element, if it is stored at 2000, the next element will be at 2008, and so on. So for a double array, the only change you will make will be at this data type. If this array was a character array, it is going to be MA plus I into 1. Okay, for a character array. So you have already looked at address calculation. We have already looked at a lot of other things today. Let us just quickly see what are the topics that we looked at. We looked into what are arrays, what are the advantages, how do you declare an array statically, how do you initialize an array, the different cases that will occur when you initialize an array, dynamic memory allocation using malloc, and how you're going to free the memory dynamically using the free method. And we looked into the different representation, what are these statements, how are they equivalent, as well as the address calculation of an array. So we have up till now covered all of the prerequisites for starting up with coding questions for an array. So if you have any doubts up till now, you can ask in the group. We are going to have a 5 minutes break here. So currently it is 12:26. Let us start at 12:31. Till then, if you want to ask any questions from any of the sections that we have discussed today, you can drop your queries in the group. Otherwise, let's just take a break for 5 minutes and start at 12:31. Okay, so I can see a lot of questions on the group. Some of you want me to repeat the address calculation part. I'm going to consider your questions one by one. Let me just first repeat this address calculation part. So we are talking about address calculation of the ith element of the array. So say for example, you have this element here. Sorry about this. So you have this array element ARR of I. We say that you are always going to require the base or the starting address of the array. So say for example, you have this MA, which is the starting address. Let us consider the starting address of this array as 2000, which is MA in this case. And now if you want to calculate the position or the address of the ith element, what will happen in that case? You say, tell me what is the value of I. So say for example, the value of I is 2. So you, what do you do here? You say MA plus I, the value of I is 2 into 4. Okay. So you say MA, if it was 2000, for example, we have considered it as 2000 plus 2 into 4, which is 8. This gives you 2008. So what is the address? We are talking about the address of the element which is at index 2. At index 2 we have this element, and the address here is 2008. You see 2008. Why? Because each element in the array is going to take up 4 bytes. 4 bytes, since this is an integer array. We are currently talking about an integer array, and that is why we have multiplied this index by 4 as well. So you do 2000 plus 4, 2000 plus 8 for this particular position, which is at index 2, and that is what is the address that you get for this index 2. Now when we talk about double array, we say that this size is going to be 8. Each element is going to occupy 8 bytes, right? So that is why you multiply it by 8. The first element will be at 2000, the second will be at 2008. The third element will be at 2016. Now similarly for a character array, since a character element is going to require only 1 byte, right? So you multiply 1 here. 1 byte here, the next byte will be here. So say if you have by this is, if you have a character array, this is going to require 1 byte. So if this is 2000, this will, the next element will be at 2001. The address will be 2001. The third will be 2002. Similarly, you have used and multiplied a 1 here for a character array. How the size of the data type changes in a double pointer. While considering, we are not considering a double pointer here. We are only looking at this here. So do not go into double pointers for now. We are going to consider those things as well. And in further classes, we are going to look at those as well. How do we initialize an array or size given by the user? So either you enter, so you're saying that you ask the user to input the size of the array. Yes. So you have already, so yes, either you could do this or you could use dynamic. So if you want to use dynamic memory allocation, you could do that as well. So you simply have a pointer, let us say P, and you say int star malloc, and you say size of, since it is going to be an integer array, so you say size of int multiplied by the value of n that has been entered by the user. So this is simply dynamic memory allocation based on the number of elements that the user wants to input. Okay, so this is it. So we have already crossed the time let us just begin with certain coding questions. We are going to look at few coding questions today regarding arrays, and then we are going to further look at one of the okay. So before we move into coding questions, there is something that I want you to tell you, which is that I am going to be posting a Hacker Earth link, which is going to be a 1 hour test. You are going to take up this test. It is only going to be a 1 hour test. There are going to be two simple questions. These questions were simple, so I gave only 1 hour time, and these questions are related to arrays only. They are very simple, so you can take that test up anytime before 9 a.m. tomorrow. So the test time is going to end at 9 a.m. tomorrow. So before 9 a.m. on 16th of December 2020, you can take that test up, and it is only a 1 hour test. So I'm going to be posting the link in the group, the Telegram group only, and with that. There are two different links. So all those who are from GEHU are going to go to a separate link that all the details will be mentioned. So GEHU students should take up the test from a separate link, and GEHU from a separate link. For we have already created different tests for you, so you can access your own links depending upon your university. So do not do the cross thing, so that it is easier for us to evaluate. Otherwise, evaluation becomes difficult. So that was the only purpose for creating two different links for you. The test is going to be the same. Okay, so since we have looked at a lot of basics for now regarding arrays, let us quickly look at a simple code. So you have already coded in C or C++ programming language. We are going to be going ahead and talking about certain coding questions, and we are going to be discussing only the logic. The rest of the coding part and the complete making should be done by you. We are going to be discussing the logic, and we can write the pseudocode part as well. Okay, so let us start with the first coding question for today, which is going to be how are you going to delete an element from the array given the value of the element? Okay, so the first question, let me write that down. Given a value, uh, delete, search and delete it from the array. Let me write it this way. Search and delete this value from the array. Okay, so this is the first question. I would like to go ahead and discuss about whatever approach you think can be followed in this particular question. So you can post your answers in the Telegram group itself. How are you going to do it? I just simply want a simple algorithm. It can be in term of the words. You can explain it in English as well. If you want to write down a simple pseudocode, you could do that. Post that in the Telegram group. Okay, so Naman has a question here. I want to ask, if we take a same type of variable using dynamic memory allocation and static allocation, will pointer occupy more space as it firstly occupies memory to store address of pointer, and in stack and then memory for pointer in heap? I did not understand your question. So if you are saying that will the pointer require different space? No, the pointer will not require different space, since it is only storing the address, be it be it that it stores the address on the heap or otherwise. It is going to take up the same space because it is only storing an address. So whenever you're dynamically allocating memory, the pointer is not occupying any space. The pointer only requires space to store the address, the address, and not the actual space that you are reserving for it. This reserved space is in the heap, which is pointed to by that particular pointer. Okay, so a lot of you have answered the question as well, which is take out. Okay, so you say you take out the particular value in temporary variable, shift the later variable to the place one before, and run n minus one time. Okay, we search the value in array by using loop, then swap the values after that, then decrease the array size by one. Yes, so a lot of you have given correct answers, which is okay, just let me, yes. So the simple algorithm here will be, um, to first search the element. Now, if you found out the element in the array, then great. You note down the index. You note down the index of this particular element in the array, and the next thing that you do is, if you say did not find out the element, you simply output this thing that I was not able to find out the element in the array, and thus it cannot be deleted. And if you have found out the element, what do? You delete the element. And how do you do that? You do that by shifting. So you say by shifting elements to the left by one position. So this is a simple logic that you can follow. Let us just quickly look at how this can be done. So it is going to be simply by, let us consider a small example. So if you say that you have this array which has, let us say, 4 elements, and now you want to, let us say, delete 14. Okay, so now when you want to delete 14 from this array, what do? First, you run a loop, and in the loop, you are going to search for 14. You say, I am going to search for the element 14 in the array. Now, say you have found out this element 14 at this index, which is at index 2. And what do? You stop there, and now you say that I am going to shift. So how will the deletion thing happen? It will simply happen when you are going to shift the elements towards their left by one position. So what do? You found out the element 14 here. You say I am going to shift the elements on its right by one position towards the left. So you simply have this array now, which is 10, 7, 14. Sorry, 14 is deleted. So here you have 17, because 17 has occupied the position of 14. So 17 comes here, and now you say that I am going to decrement the size of the array. So earlier the size of the array was 4. Now you have deleted an element, so the size of the array becomes 3. So if in case you want to simply write down a simple pseudocode, how you're going to do that? You say you are going to start with a for loop. This for loop is going to be for searching. So you say you start from I is equal to 0. So to I less than n, you do I plus plus. And now you are saying that if let us say this element 14 is inside variable e. So you say if e is equivalent to any element inside the array, you're checking that one by one. You simply break. Let us say you break. Why? Because you already have this value at a particular which is at index I. So you come out of the loop, you already have the value at an index which is I. So I was at that particular index. So now what do? You say you simply do, let us say j is another variable, and you say starting from j is equal to I, go on up till j less than n and do j plus plus every time and simply shift the values towards the left. So all of the values which are starting from this particular index, they are going to be shifted towards their left by one position. So this is what you're doing using the second for loop here. And later on, the thing that you could do is simply decrement the value of n. N was the size of the array that you have. So you say n is equal to n minus 1 or n minus minus, right? So this is something simple. Um, we looked into deleting an element because we just wanted to understand what was the logic behind deleting a particular element in the array. Let us quickly look at another um, piece of code. So this time I want you to tell me what will be the logic to reverse an array. Okay, so this time whenever you are going to be posting in the group, uh, I want a simple logic of how are you going to reverse an array, and we are not going to use any extra space, and we do not want to just print the elements in reverse order. We actually want to reverse the array that is given to us as an input. So what is the logic that you are going to follow? And also tell me how will the for loop, if you're using the for loop, how are you going to run the for loop in order to reverse an array? Okay, so some of you are asking if the array is not sorted or it is sorted. We haven't we haven't discussed things like that. We did not talk about if the array is sorted or not. So by default, we were considering that the array is not sorted in the first question where you want to delete an element. So yes, just do not go into these much details or until and unless it has been specifically mentioned. Okay, so we have been we were going to discuss reversing an array. A lot of you have already mentioned the answer. So you are saying that you are going to run the loop till n by 2 and do the swapping of the first with the last index. Okay, swap first and last elements and use for n by 2. Okay, run a simple loop from 0 to n by 2. You can use the STL function in reverse, correct? You could do that. But we are currently talking about the logic and not using any inbuilt functions. Okay, so a lot of you are also giving me how you are going to swap the variables. Okay, good. So yes, a lot of you already know how it is going to be done. So let us quickly discuss this. So say for example, let me just write down an example. Let us just consider if possible, let us just consider this. Okay, I guess something just happened. Is the screen visible to everyone? Okay, okay, let us quickly move ahead. We have less time. So, say for example, you have a small array, and let us just consider the same array that we considered earlier. Let us say you have this array, and now you want to reverse this. So the logic that we are going to be following, and a lot of you have already mentioned it, is to go run a loop till the n by 2th elements or less than n by 2 starting from 0 and swap these elements. So you are going to swap the positions of these elements. So the reversed array that you're going to be getting is 17, then 14, because 14 and 7 are going to swap their positions, 10 and 17 are going to swap their positions. So you get the reversed array. The simple logic here will be to start a loop from 0 and going on up till less than n by 2 and increment the value of I. Simply use a temporary variable which is going to store the value of a of I. Now a of I should be equal to a of n minus I minus 1, and the simple logic that you follow when you swap will be the same, right? So this is the simple logic to reverse and